Let's start off with a discussion on pruning. Hops pruning is simple and easy. It begins in the late spring to facilitate the selection of bines that will be trained up the strings, and continues throughout the summer to keep the base of the plants clean. In the spring, the first bines that emerge are often cut back to the ground to select bines that are later and less likely to be infected with disease. Pruning in the spring is relatively simple. Using a pair of clippers, cut all emerged bines to the ground. Be sure to remove all cut bines from the field. Where spring hops pruning gets a bit tricky is in the timing. Hops require long days to induce flower and cone production, and should have an optimal amount of plant growth before they start to flower. Pruning too early or too late could reduce yields. Because there is still a lot we're learning about hops production in Arkansas, the best time to prune is still being determined. As part of this research trial, we are looking at effects of different pruning timings. 1/3 of this section of cascade plants was pruned on April 15th, 1/3 on May 1st, and the final third on May 15th. Early yield results on these cascade plants indicate pruning later, around May 1st to May 15th, has the best results. It is likely that different cultivars will need different pruning dates. The second type of pruning begins after the spring cut down, when selected bines have begun to regrow and will continue throughout the season. When these regrown bines reach 4 to 6 feet high, remove the lower leaves and laterals from the bottom 12 to 18 inches of the bines. This allows for better air circulation in the hops yard and can also aid in the prevention of foliar disease. Next, we'll look at trellising and training the bines. At this time, I'm not going to talk about site selection and preparation, but check out our fact sheet for more information on these topics. I will mention that it is important to have the trellis built and the irrigation installed before planting the hops plants. Hops grow rapidly in the summer, growing as much as 12 inches per day. Bines easily reach 18 to 20 feet tall each season. Trellising helps keep the bines off the ground, improves airflow, and it makes management and harvest easier. There are several different types of trellising systems out there, and we won't go into specifics today on all the styles that are available, but we'll briefly show you the 2 types we are trying out at the research station. In our main system, we modified an old grape trellis, extending it to 12 feet and adding extra braces and anchors to ensure stability in the wind. Typically, hops are grown on 18-foot tall trellises, but we were interested in seeing if grape growers could modify a row or 2 to grow hops. We are also evaluating an ibex trellis developed by Trellis Growing Systems that can be rotated down to avoid the use of ladders. This trellis is also 12 feet tall. In these plots, we are also trying to grow in black landscape fabric for weed control. Next, we will talk about training the bines. Many of these basic principles we will cover regarding training are true regardless of the trellis height or design. While there are trellising lines and anchors designed specifically for hops, we adapted items we already had on hand. Now, like I mentioned earlier, our hops trellis is 12 feet high, so we cut the trellis training lines in 13-foot lengths. We have tried a couple kinds of material for lines, and so far, baling twine has worked the best for us. Hops production guides recommend using 1 to 3 trellis lines per plant. The number of lines you use will depend on the cultivar and vigor of your hops plants. We decided to use 3 trellis lines per plant. We may adjust this number in the future as we learn more about how different cultivars grow in our climate. All 3 lines were tied to a landscape staple, which was inserted at an angle near the crown of the hop plant. We insert the staples at an angle, so when the lines are pulled tight, the staples don't pull out of the ground. Using a ladder, the lines are secured to the top trellising wire. Space the lines about 6 inches apart on the wire. The lines will become a bit slack as the season progresses, so be sure to pull them tight when initially securing them to the trellis wire. Installing the trellising lines can be done the day you prune or shortly after. Hops grow quickly, so don't wait too long in getting the trellis lines up after spring pruning. Installing the line before pruning is possible, but will complicate and slow pruning. Bines will begin to re-emerge very quickly after pruning. As they do, select the 3 best bines and begin training them to the line, 1 bine per line. Train the bines clockwise around the twine. One of the best things about growing hops is once that you get the bines started on the lines, they will do the rest themselves. Hops have a shallow root system, making them very susceptible to drying out in the heat of an Arkansas summer. They also require a consistent supply of water during the growing season to support their rapid growth. But the plants cannot withstand flooding. Plants may need several gallons of water per day during the height of the summer. Drip irrigation is the best option for irrigating hops in order to maintain moisture in the shallow root zone and ensure foliage remains dry to reduce disease potential. One line of hard-sided tubing per row is common, and recommendations suggest in-line emitters spaced at every 2 feet with an output of 0.42 gallons per hour. During the peak of the growth and heat, we irrigate 3 times a week for several hours. Finally, let's talk a little bit about fertilizing hops. As hops have not been grown extensively in Arkansas, the soil testing lab does not yet have a crop code for hops. This means getting fertilizer recommendations from a soil test would not be specific for hops. To compensate for this, we chose to follow standard fertilizing recommendations for hops production. For second-year production and onwards, 100 to 150 pounds of nitrogen per acre is recommended. We split this recommended amount of nitrogen into 4 equal apps and used a balanced triple 13 fertilizer. The first application was applied on May 15th, with the remaining 3 applications following every 2 weeks. We ended up fertilizer applications in mid-June to early July because research has shown that most of the fertilizer requirements occur in the early growing season. For small-scale hops growers, 1 tablespoon of triple 15 sprinkled every 2 weeks around the base of the plant from early May to early July should be sufficient. Fertilizer can be applied through fertigation or by spreading a granular fertilizer. Because we are testing different rates as part of our trial, we applied fertilizer by hand. If applying by hand, be sure to spread it evenly to avoid burning roots. When possible, apply before rain or before irrigation to make the fertilizer available to the plant more quickly. Because our climate and soils are different than areas where hops are typically grown, we are looking at varying rates of fertilizer and the effects on hops cone yields and hops cone quality. We will report back in the next few years on our results.